All right, I think we're ready to start today's webinar. Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, Google Workspace with Gemini, Security and Privacy. I'm Chris Jones, CEO of Suitebriar. Today we're joined by many current Suitebriar clients as well as some new guests. And for those less familiar with Suitebriar, we're a premier Google Cloud partner with more than 12 years of experience assisting Google Cloud customers with value-added services, including POCs, workshops, training, technical demos, data migration and deployment, among many other offerings and services. Today, I'm joined by Michael Kim, Global Channels Lead at Google, as well as Andrew Fantoni, Head of Customer Engineering and Deployments at Suitebriar. This is part one of a multi-part series focused on Google Workspace with Gemini. Future and perhaps more exciting topics will include Notebook LM, Google Vids, and many of the Gemini features that are focused more on productivity and collaboration. But today we're starting with security and privacy, which we've heard and found to be the most common initial blocker for organizations exploring AI. There'll be a Q&A. We'll ask that you hold questions until the end. But if you have a question, you can submit it to the Q&A. So you'll want to navigate to the activities launcher on the bottom right corner of your Google Meet window. Click Q&A and then ask a question. We'll reserve time at the end to answer questions. Any questions we may be unable to get to, we'll answer in a follow-up email that will be sent to all attendees. And with no further ado, I will hand it over to Andrew Fantoni, Head of Customer Engineering and Deployments at Suitebriar, to begin the webinar. Thanks for joining.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the introduction. Hi, everyone. As he had mentioned, I am the Head of Customer Engineering and Support, and today's webinar will be going over security and privacy within Workspace with Gemini. The first section that we'll be covering is just around the security overview and having a high-level look at what Google's done to protect the environment and ensure that there are the right controls around Gemini. And then second, we'll be taking a look at the actual controls and what an admin can do within Google Workspace to allow for or disallow and make available Gemini along with the applications and integrations. So the first thing that we really want to highlight is that Workspace with Gemini gives you choice and control over everything within your organization's data. And this first pillar really grounds us in saying, right, your data is your data. That means it belongs to you. Google isn't using it to train its models outside of your domain or without your permission. In order to do so, Google would prompt you and say that you were doing so, or the user would be sharing things out explicitly, right? And second, your data is not sold or used for any sort of ad targeting. Second pillar, you are in control of your data. You have all of the controls to identify and protect the sensitive data, to introduce automated workflows to act on your behalf, and make sure that everything that should remain sensitive and secure is doing so. Your existing workspace security and sovereignty policies also already apply. So things like permissions and how you control those through Google Drive, any sort of context-aware access, or data loss protection policies that you have in place, capture the data that is being used by Gemini. And last, third pillar here, you can stay compliant. Right, Google's done tremendous work to achieve a number of internationally recognized security and privacy certifications through SOC, a number of ISOs, as well as being able to help you meet your HIPAA and FedRAMP compliance needs most recently. Really driving into this first point, right, of your data being your data, we have this nice diagram that showcases the interaction of what a user is going through when prompting and receiving a tailored response, right? So left to right, First thing to mark is that Gemini only retrieves relevant data content in Workspace that users already have access to, right? So if I'm not, say, on an access control list for a Google Drive document, I wouldn't be able to prompt Gemini and say, provide me a summary of this content. Once that's exited the customer data boundary and gone to the trust boundary, right, you actually now have the ability administratively to control how long Gemini is going to be storing user prompts as well as those generated responses. Once Gemini generates a response, especially if you've chosen to ground it and double check on search with real world data, your existing security controls are being applied to the response prior to being output to your end user. So again, any sort of DLP, information rights management policies, data region policies, or other security or sovereignty controls that you had in place will act on that prompt and ensure that it's outputting the right response to the end user. At which point, right, Gemini isn't sharing your prompts or generated responses with anyone else in the org or any other users unless explicitly marked to do so. With a lot of the controls that Workspace has, right, they're all with the intent to safeguard sensitive data. And it starts at the user level. So any sort of access permissions that are being driven by access control lists, perhaps being driven by groups and assignments there or shared drives, right? The access for that individual user needs to be in place in order for the user to actually use Gemini and create prompts and get responses on that. The second layer comes with built-in controls such as AI classifications, DLP, and information rights management, which can help identify, classify through labels, and protect access to sensitive data. And at the bottom layer here, we have client-side encryption, which also helps prevent access specifically to mail and drive that users may prompt with Gemini against. The best part of this being through Workspace with CSC, the organization controls the keys. Further to this, you can now decide how Gemini is rolled out across your organization. The Gemini app, the integrations, Notebook LM, it can all be controlled and provided access to your users, either driven by organizational units or by groups. For most organizations, these tools are enabled by default. Google wants to make them available to end users, and administratively, we can control that rollout based on change management, training, and ensuring that our users are in the know about the applications. Here's just a great list, right, of all of the safety, privacy, and security certifications that Google's received around Gemini. Again, SOC, ISO, HIPAA, and GDPR compliant. A nice comparative sheet, right, against its competitors. And I think one of the really cool ISOs to highlight here is ISO 42001. This is actually the world's first international standard for artificial intelligence management systems. And it certifies that both Gemini for Workspace and the Gemini app have been developed, deployed, and maintained responsibly with appropriate ethical considerations, data governance, and transparency. Gemini for Workspace is industry ready to support businesses and public sector organizations while still benefiting the end user. For more detailed information, everyone can refer to the Generative AI in Workspace Privacy Hub. That's available within the Workspace Admin Help Center today. And the hub effectively provides comprehensive details available around admin controls and Gemini's privacy, security, and compliance commitments. Next, we have this wonderful hierarchy on how Workspace really helps maintain complete control of your data, right? From the top down client-side encryption, right? Being able to own the encryption keys and set specific data that is locked out from Gemini from being accessed and prompted against. Context aware, controlling the IP, the device, and the geographic origin of where users are accessing Workspace and ensuring that they're doing so within the appropriate regions. Even access control, right? Being able to narrow the scope with which Google support is able to look at customer data and act on it is all within the realm of possible through admin controls. Like local data storage, right? You as the customer are able to choose a country-specific location for storing a copy of the data, and further to that, where it's being processed via data regions like GDPR, so using dedicated regions or combinations of regions with where your data is stored and being processed. And this is all being built on Google's Zero Trust secure architecture that inherently helps to reduce risk. Next, we'll take a look at the admin controls that we can set within the console. And so the first thing that we like to drive here is that Gemini is designed to be an extension of the user, right? And this is key to understanding security around that interaction with Gemini. Essentially, again, Gemini can't access anything that the user doesn't already have access to. So Gemini isn't creating additional overhead in terms of managing access for separate entities. It operates within existing permissions and access controls that are in place for that user. But it's key to consider outside of the user, right, what organizationally is being done to manage that user access to company information. And so some of the questions that we can ask and some of the policy that we can set around this is, do we have an oversharing problem within our organization? Are too many files being shared with too few restrictions or safeguards? Are we really utilizing the mechanisms available within the console to help control some of the interactions that users will have with Gemini? And last, how does Google today ensure that a user only has access to appropriate company data? So these are all really important questions to address to ensure that Gemini operates effectively and securely within your environment. So taking a look at the different security controls that are available, again, we can hit them from the user level down to the device, all the way through looking at what data is available to Gemini and taking a look at the interactions through logging, right? As far as specific data goes and being able to isolate that, we can use client-side encryption and make it so that Gemini for Google Workspace is unable to act on email or any files that are chosen to be encrypted. In terms of user access, right, along the left-hand side here, this is just from the admin console, we can take a look at controlling the Gemini app, Gemini for Workspace, so to distinguish between the two, right, being able to go to gemini.google.com or AI Studio and have your conversation type prompt, query, and response through Gemini versus Gemini for Workspace, which is available through integrations like the sidebar in Drive and Docs, the sidebar or Help Me Write within Gemini, Google Chat, or some of the audio or video alterations through Google Meet. That also includes things like transcripts and Gemini notes for Meet, and having those produced via recordings. Gemini app user access, again, specific to the application, the extension as part of the beta program, right? Being able to allow this as well is also driven by users, groups, and organizational units. So if today you have specific test groups or OUs like finance or your IT or IS team. You can segment the rollout and ensure that the right folks are getting access first, or you're allowing things like communication or training to take place before providing full access to the organization. As far as context-aware access, right, you are able to set conditions on device, region, and IP with which your users are accessing Gemini. And you can set this to both be prior to setting this active, have it be in a monitoring mode to see which users would actually be affected before enforcing and ensuring that your users are having these security policies applied to them. There's also Google Gemini for Workspace and DLP, right? Creating content restrictions. All of this is being driven by the ability to disable download, print, and copy. So once I actually get to my action and I set my condition against applications that would be utilizing Gemini, Gemini then is blocked through this DLP rule of download, print, and copy. Last year, we can use the security investigation tool. You can see here within the search, right, that I'm using drive log events and that my app name contains Gemini. In executing this search, I'm able to find my users that are prompting Gemini and receiving prompts through the or receiving responses back through the model, and what those interactions are through different files or folders within Google Drive. Additionally, you have access to Vault as well. Within the search, right, I can take a look at creating a rule, a hold, or an export on the data that is searched against with regard to Gemini app and the prompts and the responses that users are receiving there. Within the slides that we can share out, we have a list of a number of documents that are also available to end users. That includes some of the demo today and diving into the same content that we are reviewing. So that pretty much wraps up what we'll cover in terms of security and admin controls. At this point, we'll have a look and see if there have been any questions from the group.
We have no submitted questions. Okay. I encourage folks, if you want to navigate to the activities launcher on the bottom right-hand corner, submit a question, or if you want to utilize the hand raise feature, we can call on some folks. You'll have to unmute yourself.
And I've made that available now. So if there are any questions from the group, you can unmute yourself. You can raise your hand. I'm happy to cover any of the security topics as well directly out of the console. If folks would like to look at things like enabling, disabling the applications for access, that would be Gemini within the integrations of Workspace, within the application itself. We can take a look at some of the context-aware, the DLP, and classifications as well. So we'll go ahead and keep the session available and open for a few minutes here. As Chris had mentioned at the beginning of the call as well, this is a 6-part webinar series where we'll dive into the actual tools like utilizing GEMS and the Gemini app. We'll take a look at things like Notebook LM as well as Google Vids. So really highlighting and showcasing a lot of the more recent end user features as opposed to today covering more of the administrative and security controls that can be put around the Gemini experience.
And Andrew, I can ask perhaps like a leading question. Based on our experiences presenting Gemini and speaking with several customers about Gemini, a lot of the security and privacy questions really get reduced to privacy and trust questions. And one of the most common misconceptions we've heard is that Gemini will use an organization's questions and prompts to train itself to get better, right? We know that's not the case, but what commitments has Google made to ensure that? Is that where some of the third-party compliance regulators come in, some of the ISO certs? How does Google guarantee that?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. I think we covered a lot of just the admin function today, especially around being able to search against, monitor, and apply rules that capture interactions with Gemini and the data that is there. Much of the challenge today, especially around adoption with Gemini, has been what controls can I put in place? Not so much like what is Google doing automatically, but what tools can I leverage right within the admin console that exists today to really secure that interaction. And then further to that, we have the change management side, right? And being able to control this rollout in a way that allows for space and training, right? Here are the things that Google has done to secure your interaction. And then here are the things that our organization has done to secure your interaction with Google. So being able to apply classification labels to sensitive data, being able to enact policy through DLP that captures that classification label and says, no, you can't actually prompt against that data or share against it or share the information with those in the organization on this data, is a very powerful feature that I think that information benefits everyone here, and just sharing that, right? Being aware that these are the things and controls that Google has put in place and made available to admins. We do have one question here that's in the group. What are 1 to 2 key ways Gemini boosts daily team workflows in Workspace apps? That's a very wonderful and powerful question, right? And I think just having the direct integrations within Workspace are incredibly beneficial to end users, right? So if I could give 2 very quick examples, right, in just using this interface, the compose function and using the help me write. One of the things that I had mentioned from a security standpoint was that, let me pull up the point because I think it was a really good one, right? Gemini is an extension of the user. When it comes to something like the help me write function, I often struggle with the creative element of emails. And so having a model that's able to generate a framework for an email on something that I'd like to convey through messaging is really valuable to me, right? So please write a quick and perhaps quirky, right, injecting some sort of tone into my email here. Oh, I'm not displaying my screen. Excuse me. Let me reshare my screen. Here we are. Let me backtrack, right?
Yeah, we can see your screen now.
Perfect. So help me write, being able to use this function as it exists within Gemini, right? Coming up with an email, please help me write a quick and quirky company announcement email that today I am hosting a webinar on Gemini at 1 p.m. PST, sometime in the future, right? Again, it's not going to be something that is perhaps definitively what I can use, but it takes away a lot of the guesswork. So what I will say about the tool, right, is it takes away some of that need to think about things and gives you a framework that I can then use, insert, and if I say like this, right? I can do so. I can also say something and alter this. If you're unable to make it, right, we'll provide a recording. But otherwise, this is very valuable to me. One of the other tools that's very helpful, just from a productivity standpoint around filtering, right? I often don't like to look at my inbox, which is quite messy right now with a number of announcement messages and some alerts, just as me being an admin within our demo environment, right? Launching the sidebar. If I say, don't like using filters, I can do things like use natural language to find specific information. So I could say things like find all email alerts over the last 2 weeks from the Google admin console, right? Instead of having to go into the search bar and use filters, perhaps I'm not as well acclimated with that. It actually didn't even produce the response that I was looking for, but still a value, right, is telling me how exactly I can actually find and refine my filter. So giving me a quick response, right, in what I can do to find the information that I'm looking for. Generally speaking, when you input a prompt like that, it works well. We can maybe refine this a little bit, and I can be specific with an email address, right, and say, find all emails from over the last 2 months. And what it should do is produce all of the emails here and filtered. There we go. So a little bit of refinement, right? Generally speaking, my first prompt, let me know a way for me to use the filter. But in this sense, I'm using natural language to execute the same thing without having to think of the technical work required to find the data. So in terms of productivity, the side panel when working within Gmail, the side panel when working within Google Drive, or even using some of the functionality as search within the Gemini app is incredibly valuable in creating efficiencies and boosting daily team productivity.
Hey, Andrew, Mike here. Just want to add to that point. Great question in terms of how Gemini can boost team workflows. And I think, the important point that you made is how it's seamlessly integrated into the application itself, right? Into the productivity suite of Workspace. So I think that's one thing that we found with a lot of our users is that it's a click away versus going outside in different application and different screens. And then another point you had brought up really is how it's starting a lot of our work, right? So today what we're seeing is instead of, starting on a blank doc sheets with numbers, it's being able to now interact with what we call, an AI assistant. So being able to start, a marketing brief, creating a sales outreach email, these are all now becoming, I would say, fundamentals of how it's changing, the way of work, and it's bleeding into all aspects of the different business lines. And not to spoil the upcoming series that you'll have in store, but we see it being really impactful to sales teams, customer support, where they can quickly gather, all the data points to create an up-to-date FAQ, create responses to, priority questions that are coming through queues. Sales teams being able to adapt pitch decks, call scripts quickly as they're revectoring to different segments in different industries. So again, to the question of how it's changing the workflow, it's tremendous, and I think we're just seeing the beginning. And again, it's going to be very cool to see all the different use cases come through. We've been showcasing them at Next. just this past April, but I would say, Suitebriar are going to also show some of this, this power in the upcoming webinars. So I would say for those that have it, definitely try it. And for those that don't, this is really going to be a game changer as to how you approach your day-to-day work.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that point. And yes, I am definitely very excited for everyone to join us for the remaining sessions. Again, security tends to be a tough topic, but you had pointed out a number of use cases, especially around Notebook LM, around creating some of the efficiencies that you have within content generation and generative AI as it exists integrated through tools like Google Drive. And then further to that, right, I think there's a space to be said about combining all of the applications through AI as well and creating workflows through things like AppScript, right? That is all prompting that can be done with Gemini, right? Gemini is wonderful at producing code as well and creating even further efficiencies as far as integrating the tools with themselves. So hopefully we'll get to showcase that with a number of the use cases that we've generated around sales, around marketing, around support engagements, both internally and externally, with things like being able to create repos of data that Gemini can query against, that you can design chatbots around and things like that. Any other closing thoughts here, Chris, before we end the session? I'm not seeing any other questions or hands raised by folks.
Yeah, I'd like to thank whoever submitted that question. We will have future episodes of this webinar series focused on productivity, and we'll comment on team workflows, more specific use cases. It was a great question. We hear a lot about time saving, efficiency, but I also just want to chime in and mention quality. The quality of the writing that you get from Help Me Write, or the summaries that exist in various Workspace apps is great. It's remarkable, right? And I feel like that's a point that's like underappreciated. All of the output from Gemini is context aware, user specific. And if you have a document in your drive that is in the back of your memory and you've forgotten, Gemini won't forget, right? It's going to scan the entire wealth of documents and knowledge, the knowledge base you have access to. We have another question: how do we sign up for the remaining sessions? And that's a good segue here to the close. So again, we'd like to thank everyone for joining this session, Google Workspace with Gemini, Security and Privacy. We will have 5 additional parts. We'll be sending a communication to all attendees who were present today with information and instructions on signing up for the rest of the series. Well, we're finalizing dates, just pending some product announcements and releases that are forthcoming. This is all very hot off the presses, but we'll send a follow-up within the next 24 hours. We'll share some links and resources related to security and privacy, as well as a sign-up link so that you are added to the remaining parts of the series. We had several Suitebriar clients in attendance today. If you're a Suitebriar client, I'd encourage you to reach out to your account manager if you're interested in a Gemini workshop, proof of concept, training, or just a follow-up discussion about your specific organizational needs. If you're a guest, whether you're on Google through a different channel or on Microsoft, we'd also encourage you to reach out to us through the follow-up email, and we'd be happy to schedule a proof of concept workshop or discussion with you as well. It's all complimentary. This session has been recorded, and the recording will be attached to the follow-up email, as well as the transcript of today's session. I'll pause for one moment, see if there are any other final questions trickling through. And I think there are not. And with that, again, thank you very much for joining us today. This concludes part 1 of 6 of our Gemini with Google Workspace webinar series. And again, the follow-up email will be sent within the next 24 hours to all attendees. Thank you for your participation and have a good rest of the week.
Thanks,
Chris.
everyone.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
Everyone.